Mount Everest, where gridlock on top of the mountain may be to blame for at least 9 deaths just this year there.
Something went horribly wrong on Mount Everest.
The second American dying in just days, bringing the total to 11 deaths already this season.
A drone sent to capture harmless footage from the slopes recorded something so disturbing that officials immediately shut down the area and ordered silence from everyone involved.
Researchers and scientists have found very, very few fossils. And because of that, it's very hard to suggest that became the basis for the Yeti.
No one outside the investigation has seen what was found, but whispers from the mountains say it changed how climbers look at Everest forever.
Yeah, I think it's a body.
From that chilling discovery to the mountain's darkest deaths and mysteries, these are the most terrifying events ever recorded on the world's highest peak. The drone discovery that authorities silenced. The drone operator thought it would be a normal survey flight, but what appeared on his screen made his blood run cold. As the drone hovered over Rainbow Valley, the frozen graveyard of dead climbers, its high-definition camera caught something that should have been impossible.
To do all these drone flights and to photograph the terrain rather than having to put boots all over the mountain, which is incredibly dangerous.
Beneath the ice, where hundreds of bodies have been trapped for decades, one of them moved. At first it was small, a twitch in the shoulder, a slow bend in the knee. Then several bodies began to shift together, like something was crawling under them. The operator zoomed in, and for a moment the camera focused on a face half buried in snow. One eyelid flickered, then the entire screen went black.
It's unbelievable what you're doing, Renan.
The signal did not fail on its own. The operator's control monitor showed sudden interference, a solid red warning that indicated manual jamming. Someone had cut the feed. Within minutes, his radio connection died and his backup drone lost power mid-air. When he returned to base camp, shaken and pale, a group of armed officials was already there. They demanded the drone, the memory cards, and the backup files. They said the footage violated safety protocols. Climbers nearby later described the same area shaking hours after the flight. Thick cracks opened in the glacier and a foul stench poured out, like rotting meat soaked in chemicals. The air burned their throats. Others swore they heard a deep humming echoing under the ice, a low, steady sound that grew louder at night, almost like something breathing.
That's spooky.
Some scientists later suggested that trapped gases from decomposing bodies or pressure changes beneath melting ice could have caused the strange movements. But those who saw the footage insisted it looked too deliberate, too slow, as if something alive was stirring. 2 days later, the entire section of the ridge was closed. Drones were banned, and soldiers began patrolling the site. Officials said it was for respect, but those who had seen the footage before it was seized told another story. They said what the drone captured should never have been seen by human eyes. The lost Soviet expedition. When rescuers found the old Soviet tent on Mount Everest in 2017, they thought it was another empty ruin swallowed by the ice. But when they unzipped the entrance, the smell hit first. It was sharp and rotten, like wet metal mixed with decay. Inside, 4 frozen bodies sat upright in their sleeping bags, their eyes wide open as if they had died in mid-scream. Their skin was gray, their faces twisted in fear. Each man still wore a red patch with the hammer and sickle, and in the corner lay a folded portrait of Joseph Stalin, perfectly preserved. Back in 1952, during the height of the Cold War, the Soviet Union sent a secret team to plant portraits of Lenin and Stalin on the world's highest peak, Mount Everest. They climbed through the death zone, where oxygen drops so low the brain starts to fail. At 26,000 feet, their radio transmissions stopped. No rescue was launched. No report was ever filed. The Soviet government erased the expedition from its records, pretending it never existed. For 65 years, their story was buried under snow and silence. The 2017 discovery shocked even veteran climbers. The bodies were not in normal sleeping positions. Their arms were locked together, as if they were holding something heavy in front of them. But nothing was there. The tent walls were ripped from the inside, and strange burn marks lined the ground beneath. Local authorities immediately sealed off the area, forbidding photographs or samples. Some scientists later claimed the burns came from a lightning strike or frozen gas ignition, but others were not convinced. They said the patterns on the tent looked too deliberate, like heat had come from beneath the snow itself. Whatever killed them, it happened fast, and it left them frozen in terror forever. The disappearance of Mallory and Irvine, 1924. When searchers finally found George Mallory's body on Mount Everest in 1999, it looked like he had died yesterday.
Burying George Mallory. We didn't find the camera. We looked fairly hard.
His skin was pale and leathery, his fingers still gripping the frozen rope that once linked him to Andrew Irvine, who was never found. The ice had preserved him for 75 years, his face twisted toward the summit as if still trying to climb. His ribs were crushed and a deep hole marked the back of his skull, as though he had fallen hard and struck rock before the mountain swallowed him whole. In June 1924, Mallory and Irvine set out to do what no one had ever done, to reach the top of Mount Everest. They were last seen through a gap in the clouds, moving upward steadily before a violent storm closed in. Then, they vanished. For decades, people wondered if they had made it to the summit before dying on the descent. If they had, they would have beaten Edmund Hillary and Tenzing Norgay by nearly 30 years. The clue that might have answered that question was missing. Mallory always carried a small camera and a photo of his wife Ruth that he promised to leave on the summit. When his body was found, the photo and camera were gone. The pockets of his jacket were torn open, and the oxygen set near him had been snapped in half. It looked like someone had searched him. Climbers who discovered the body said something else was strange. His body wasn't lying flat. It was angled upward, like he had been dragged a few feet before freezing solid. No one knows if the storm, another climber, or something else moved him. But high above the clouds, Mallory's body still faces the top, his sightless eyes fixed forever on the peak he died trying to reach. The disappearance of Mallory and Irvine. In June 1924, Mallory and Irvine set out to do what no one had ever done, to reach the top of Mount Everest. They were last seen through a gap in the clouds, moving upward steadily before a violent storm closed in. Then they vanished. For decades, people wondered if they had made it to the summit before dying on the descent. If they had, they would have beaten Edmund Hillary and Tenzing Norgay by nearly 30 years. The clue that might have answered that question was missing. Mallory always carried a small camera and a photo of his wife Ruth that he promised to leave on the summit. When his body was found, the photo and camera were gone. The pockets of his jacket were torn open, and the oxygen set near him had been snapped in half. It looked like someone had searched him. When searchers finally found George Mallory's body on Mount Everest in 1999, it looked like he had died yesterday. His skin was pale and leathery, his fingers still gripping the frozen rope that once linked him to Andrew Irvine, who was never found. The ice had preserved him for 75 years, his face twisted toward the summit as if still trying to climb. His ribs were crushed, and a deep hole marked the back of his skull, as though he had fallen hard and struck rock before the mountain swallowed him whole. Climbers who discovered the body said something else was strange. His body wasn't lying flat. It was angled upward, like he had been dragged a few feet before freezing solid. No one knows if the storm, another climber, or something else moved him. But high above the clouds, Mallory's body still faces the top, his sightless eyes fixed forever on the peak he died trying to reach. Green boots, the human landmark. Every climber who has ever pushed toward the top of Mount Everest knows the name Green Boots. For years, his body lay curled in a small rocky cave beside the main route, his neon green boots sticking out into the path. You could not miss him. Climbers were forced to crawl past his stiff legs to continue their ascent. Some touched the boots for luck. Others avoided looking at all. It was not a marker made by man, but by death itself. He is believed to be Tsewang Paljor, an Indian climber from the Indo-Tibetan Border Police team, who perished in the 1996 Everest disaster. A brutal storm struck that year, killing 8 people within hours. Paljor and his group were last seen fighting the wind near the summit ridge. When rescuers finally reached the site days later, they found him frozen solid in a sitting position, his face turned toward the trail, as if watching those who passed. His hands were still clutching his harness. For nearly 2 decades, his body served as a waypoint known by every guide and climber. Some said that at night, when the wind screamed through the pass, you could hear a faint tapping from the alcove, as if the frozen boots were knocking against the rock. Officials eventually ordered the remains moved out of sight, saying it was for respect and safety. The death of Wally Steck, the Swiss machine.
The 40-year-old, also known as the Swiss machine, is said to have died on Sunday after he fell while acclimatizing for an ascent via a less climbed route.
When rescuers found Wally Steck's body on Mount Everest in April 2017, it was shattered against the ice, as if he had fallen from the sky. His helmet was missing, his ropes were still coiled neatly in his pack, and his watch had stopped at 4:35 a.m. There were no witnesses, no tracks leading to the edge, and no one heard him fall. It was as if he had simply vanished mid-step. Steck had climbed mountains faster and more fearlessly than anyone alive. They called him the Swiss Machine because he seemed unstoppable, until Everest stopped him. Steck was preparing for a record-breaking challenge that no one had ever completed: to climb Everest and then cross over to Lhotse without oxygen or support. He had trained for months and knew every line of the route. But during an early morning climb on nearby Nuptse, something went terribly wrong. He fell nearly 1,000 meters, his body landing far from any visible drop-off. No rope had snapped, no avalanche had struck. When his body was flown down by helicopter, investigators found no clear injuries from a simple fall. His bones were crushed in strange angles, and there were deep bruises across his chest as though he had been struck by immense force. Local Sherpas later told investigators they had heard a single sharp crack echo across the mountain moments before Steck vanished. It was not the sound of ice breaking or rockfall. It was cleaner, louder, almost metallic, like a blast from deep inside the glacier. They searched the area but found no evidence of falling debris. Some Sherpas believe a section of the ridge collapsed under hidden pressure. Others whispered about something stranger. They said there is a presence on the upper slopes, something that moves only when the wind is still, unseen but heavy enough to shake the ground beneath a man's feet. Whatever that sound was, it came just seconds before Steck's final climb ended. No official explanation was ever confirmed. His death remains one of Everest's darkest mysteries. Even the most skilled climber on Earth could not escape the one truth everyone on the mountain fears. No one really knows what waits up there. Pemba Dorje Sherpa and the Voices of the Dead. When Pemba Dorje Sherpa broke the world record in 2004 by climbing Mount Everest in just 8 hours and 10 minutes, people called him a legend. But in interviews years later, he spoke less about speed and more about something that still haunted him. During one of his climbs near the South Col, where many bodies from past expeditions remain frozen into the ice, he began to hear sounds no one could explain. It started as faint shuffling in the snow. Then came low whispers that seemed to move from one side of the glacier to the other. He said the voices were not carried by the wind. They were clear and close, like someone murmuring just behind him. When he turned around, there was nothing but ice and the dim outlines of frozen climbers half buried in the slope. Others later admitted they had heard the same thing. Some even described glowing lights drifting between the corpses at night, as if the mountain itself was alive. Scientists tried to explain it. A joint research team from Nepal and Japan said the noises were caused by thermal fracturing, when trapped air bursts from cracking ice during sudden drops in temperature. The cracks can echo through the glacier and sound like voices. But those who have stood there say the sound is too human. It calls by name. It moves when you move. Pemba Dorje said that once, while passing a known death site, he heard his own name whispered twice. He froze in place, too afraid to breathe. When he forced himself to look back, a nearby body seemed to shift slightly in the snow. He finished the climb, but he never forgot that sound. Everest remembers everyone, he said quietly, and sometimes it talks back. The Yeti Footprints, 1951. It began with a photograph that terrified the world. In 1951, British mountaineer Eric Shipton was exploring near Mount Everest's Menlung Glacier when he stopped dead in his tracks. Stretching across the snow were a series of huge footprints, each one shaped like a human foot, but far too large to belong to any man. They measured nearly 13 inches